What if I told you that stupidity is not simply the absence of intelligence, but a far more dangerous force, a silent, invisible threat that has the power to turn the brightest minds into agents of destruction? Imagine a world where brilliant scientists, compassionate teachers, and loving parents all suddenly begin to believe and spread harmful ideas, not because they are evil or ignorant, but because they have stopped thinking for themselves. This is the terrifying theory Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German pastor and thinker during the rise of Nazi Germany, revealed to the world, a theory that remains profoundly relevant today. Bonhoeffer observed a chilling phenomenon. It wasn't just cruel individuals committing atrocities, but ordinary people who surrendered their capacity for independent thought, becoming willing instruments of oppression and destruction. This functional stupidity is far more insidious than we imagine. It's a kind of intellectual surrender born not out of ignorance, but out of a failure to question, to resist, or to challenge the narratives fed to us by those in power. The implications are unsettling. It means that the greatest threat to civilization may not come from overtly malevolent actors, but from the silent majority who cease to think critically and simply follow along. In the 1960s, decades after Bonhoeffer's haunting observations, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted his famous obedience experiments. Ordinary people, under the influence of authority, were willing to deliver what they believed to be dangerous electric shocks to strangers, despite hearing their screams of pain. These were not sadists or psychopaths, but regular individuals who had temporarily given up their moral judgment. Milgram's study brought scientific weight to Bonhoeffer's warnings. Intellectual surrender is not only real, it's disturbingly common, and the problem is not confined to history. Today, with social media algorithms designed to feed us emotionally charged, simple narratives, and with overwhelming economic and psychological pressures, the conditions for functional stupidity are stronger than ever. This opening chapter is an invitation, a call to wake up and recognize that the battle for independent thought is the most critical fight of our time. Will you stand firm when the pressure to conform is overwhelming? Will you dare to think for yourself even when it's difficult? In the dark shadow of Nazi Germany, Dietrich Bonhoeffer witnessed firsthand the catastrophic consequences of collective intellectual surrender. Born into a world of intellectual rigor and moral responsibility, Bonhoeffer was a German Lutheran pastor who believed deeply in the power of education, reason, and faith to guide humanity. Yet as the Nazi regime rose, he saw a terrifying transformation unfold, not among the uneducated masses, but within the very heart of Germany's educated elite. Professors, doctors, clergy, and artists, people who should have been the guardians of truth and justice, began to endorse and enact policies that contradicted everything they professed to believe. This was not ignorance. It was something far worse. These were individuals who had allowed slogans, propaganda, and social pressures to overtake their independent judgment. Bonhoeffer called this phenomenon functional stupidity, a willful blindness and stubborn refusal to engage critically with the reality unfolding before them. What made this so horrifying was not only the scale, but the stubbornness. Protests in force were useless against this form of surrender because it was deeply internalized, almost immune to reason. Evil, he noted, often carries the seed of its own destruction because it breeds resistance and doubt. But stupidity, in this sense, believes it is doing good. It convinces itself that it is righteous and that questioning is betrayal. From his prison cell, awaiting execution for resisting Hitler, Bonhoeffer wrote with haunting clarity, "Against stupidity, we are defenseless." His words echoed a profound truth about human nature and society. That reason alone cannot combat the willful abandonment of thought. This surrender was not merely personal weakness, it was a social and systemic failure. Propaganda spread through newspapers, radio, and public discourse created an environment where questioning was dangerous and conformity was rewarded. The intellectual environment became toxic, and independent thinkers were isolated or silenced. Bonhoeffer's story is not just history, it's a warning. It teaches us that educated and moral individuals can become complicit in great evils not by malice, but by surrendering their minds. It's a call to recognize that intellectual courage is as important as moral courage. His life, his resistance, and his ultimate sacrifice highlight that standing firm against intellectual surrender requires not just knowledge, but bravery. As we look to the present, Bonhoeffer's legacy challenges us to ask, when the pressure to conform rises again, will we stand firm? Will we resist the seductive ease of intellectual surrender? Or will we too become part of a tragedy yet to come? Decades after Bonhoeffer's haunting reflections, the psychological underpinnings of intellectual surrender were put under the scientific spotlight. In the 1950s and 60s, psychologists Stanley Milgram and Solomon Asch conducted groundbreaking experiments that revealed just how susceptible ordinary people are to social pressure and authority. Milgram's obedience experiments shocked the world, not just because participants were willing to administer what they believed were painful, even lethal, electric shocks to strangers, but because these participants were everyday citizens, not sadists or psychopaths. Under the command of an authority figure, they relinquished their moral compass and critical thinking. Milgram showed that the power of authority can override personal conscience and independent judgment, a chilling confirmation of what Bonhoeffer observed in Nazi Germany. Meanwhile, Solomon Asch's conformity experiments demonstrated how deeply people are influenced by the group. Even when the correct answer was obvious, individuals would conform to a unanimous but incorrect group opinion more than 75% of the time, sacrificing their own perceptions to fit in. These studies laid bare a fundamental human vulnerability. The desire to belong and obey can lead to the abandonment of truth and reason. What makes this insight even more troubling today is how modern technology exploits these same psychological tendencies. Social media platforms use algorithms that amplify emotional and sensational content, creating echo chambers where falsehoods spread faster than facts. The pressure to conform is no longer just physical or social, it's digital, constant, and invisible. People are bombarded with simplified narratives designed to provoke emotional reactions rather than thoughtful reflection. As we watch this unfold, the lessons from Milgram and Asch become more urgent than ever. They remind us that intellectual surrender isn't a failing of character alone. It's a product of social dynamics and systemic pressures that can engulf anyone. Recognizing this vulnerability is the first step toward resistance. Understanding how easily our minds can be hijacked by authority and group consensus empowers us to build defenses, critical thinking, intellectual humility, and courage. This chapter is a stark reminder The battle against functional stupidity is not just philosophical or moral, it is psychological and deeply human. The challenge remains: how do we stand firm when every social signal pulls us toward conformity? How do we protect our minds from becoming instruments of destruction? The answer, as Bonhoeffer's life and these experiments suggest, lies in awareness, vigilance, and the daily practice of independent thought. As the world moved into the 21st century, the battleground for independent thought shifted dramatically. Enter Japan, a society renowned for its rich traditions, collective harmony, and an intense social fabric woven with expectations of conformity and respect for authority. Here, the theory of functional stupidity takes on new dimensions, shaped by cultural pressures and the relentless advance of technology. The Japanese experience illuminates how societal norms can both nurture and challenge intellectual independence. In a culture where harmony is prized and dissent is often muted, the pressure to align with group consensus can be immense. But beyond tradition, modern forces amplify these dynamics. Social media platforms, tailored algorithms, and the explosion of information have transformed how people interact with ideas. Just as Bonhoeffer warned in his time, individuals, regardless of intelligence or intention, can fall prey to intellectual surrender under systemic pressure. Japan's high pressure work culture, economic uncertainty, and the prevalence of digital echo chambers create fertile ground for this phenomenon. The fear of social exclusion or losing face can discourage questioning and encourage surface level acceptance of prevailing narratives. In this environment, misinformation can spread unchecked, and critical thinking may become a quiet rebellion. Consider the story of a Japanese university professor who, despite being an expert in her field, found herself trapped in an online echo chamber that propagated pseudoscience. Her struggle highlights a universal truth: no one is immune. This new chapter in the global story of stupidity reveals how cultural, technological, and psychological forces intertwine. The challenges faced in Japan echo those seen across the world, showing that functional stupidity is not confined by geography or ideology. It is a global epidemic, fueled by economic pressures, digital manipulation, and ancient human instincts. Yet, within this darkness, there is light. Awareness of these pressures is the first step toward reclaiming intellectual freedom. Japan's evolving discourse around mental health, media literacy, and educational reform offers hope. It reminds us that while societal systems can encourage intellectual surrender, they can also nurture resilience and courage. For viewers, the lesson is clear. Understanding cultural and systemic influences on our thinking empowers us to resist. In the digital age, where every click and share can shape belief, standing firm requires not just knowledge, but bravery and self awareness. The story of Japan enriches the larger narrative, illustrating that the fight against functional stupidity is truly a global, multifaceted struggle, one that demands vigilance, empathy, and relentless courage. In today's hyperconnected world, the threat of functional stupidity has become more complex and urgent than ever. The digital revolution has brought unprecedented access to information, but has also created new mechanisms that exploit our cognitive vulnerabilities with chilling precision. Social media algorithms designed to maximize engagement and profit prioritize emotionally charged, sensational content over nuanced truth. Falsehoods spread faster than facts, feeding into our natural biases and mental shortcuts. This architecture of chosen ignorance creates echo chambers where people are rarely exposed to conflicting viewpoints, reinforcing pre-existing beliefs and dulling critical thinking. The danger is not only misinformation itself, but the systems designed to amplify it. Meanwhile, economic and psychological pressures compound the problem. Many individuals today face intense stress from job insecurity, financial burdens, and the constant flood of information. This mental overload exhausts our cognitive resources, making intellectual surrender an appealing survival strategy. Our brains, wired through millennia of evolution to prioritize speed over accuracy, now confront a world where rapid decisions often come at the expense of truth. The rise of AI deepfakes and fabricated realities adds a terrifying new layer to this challenge. These technologies can create perfectly convincing yet entirely false images, videos, and narratives, making it increasingly difficult to distinguish fact from fiction. The very architecture of human cognition is under siege, manipulated not just by propaganda, but by algorithms that understand exactly which psychological buttons to push. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we witnessed this phenomenon in stark relief. Highly educated professionals, doctors, engineers, lawyers, began sharing debunked theories about vaccines and treatments, not out of ignorance, but due to the overwhelming social and emotional pressures that erode independent thinking. This wasn't a failure of intelligence, but a failure of intellectual independence under unprecedented stress. Against this backdrop, Dietrich Bonhoeffer's warnings resonate louder than ever. His concept of costly grace, the painful, sometimes dangerous willingness to think independently, has become a radical act in a world that profits from our intellectual surrender. The question before us is urgent. Will we choose the comfort of certainty and conformity, or the difficult, often lonely path of critical thought and courage? The answer lies in daily choices, choosing curiosity over certainty, evidence over emotion, and reflection over reaction. It means cultivating intellectual humility, admitting when we don't know, and actively seeking out challenging perspectives. While individual practices are vital, systemic changes are equally crucial. Transparency in algorithms, comprehensive media literacy, and policies that reduce economic and psychological stress can create conditions where independent thought thrives rather than withers. This chapter reminds us that the fight against functional stupidity is the defining struggle of our era. It's a battle fought not with weapons, but with minds, requiring vigilance, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to truth. As we reach the end of this journey, the question remains: who will stand fast when everyone else has stopped thinking? Dietrich Bonhoeffer's life and sacrifice remind us that intellectual courage is not reserved for heroes alone. It is a daily choice available to each of us. In a world that profits from our intellectual surrender, choosing to think independently is a revolutionary act. It means embracing discomfort, admitting uncertainty, and resisting the seductive ease of conformity. Intellectual freedom comes at a price, a costly grace that demands vigilance and perseverance. But it is also the foundation of human dignity and wisdom. Every time you choose curiosity over certainty, question rather than accept, and reflection rather than reaction, you push back against the tide of functional stupidity. You defend not only your own mind, but the very possibility of a thoughtful society. This struggle is not easy. Thinking deeply can be uncomfortable, even painful. Holding contradictory ideas in your mind, questioning deeply held beliefs, and admitting ignorance require humility and strength. Yet these practices are the mental muscles necessary for navigating complexity and resisting manipulation. Remember, the moment you believe you are immune to stupidity, you have already begun to succumb. The future of human wisdom depends on our collective commitment to intellectual independence. It calls for individual courage and systemic change, creating environments where truth is valued, dissent is welcomed, and thinking is rewarded. As you leave this story, I challenge you to find one belief you hold strongly and spend time exploring the best arguments against it, not to shake your confidence, but to strengthen it or grow wiser through honest reflection. This simple act is a step toward the kind of intellectual courage Bonhoeffer died defending. Share this commitment with others. Together, by standing fast, we can build a world where human thought thrives amid complexity and challenge. In choosing to think carefully and independently, you become a guardian of wisdom in an age increasingly defined by artificial stupidity. Your mind is a battleground, and every choice matters. So, will you stand fast?